The email notification chimed just as I was stepping out of the shower. Normally, I'd ignore it. My morning routine was sacred, especially on Thursdays when I opened the gallery early for our weekly staff meeting. But something pulled me toward my phone that day. Some invisible thread of intuition that I would later be grateful for. Before we jump into this story, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Water dripped from my hair onto the screen as I opened the message from our bank. Confirmation of wire transfer, $175,000. My stomach dropped, the bathroom suddenly spinning around me. That was our entire savings account, every penny we'd put aside for the past 8 years of marriage. Gone. I steadied myself against the counter, my hands trembling as I called the bank. After 20 minutes of security questions and being transferred to 3 different departments, the truth emerged. With sickening clarity, Nathan, my husband, had emptied our joint account that morning. The money had been wired to an account I didn't recognize. I was still standing there, towel wrapped around me, hair soaking the bathroom floor, when my phone buzzed again. A text from Rebecca, Nathan's sister. "Olivia, call me. It's about Nathan and some woman named Vanessa. You need to know." I met Nathan Mitchell at a charity auction 8 years ago. I was catering the event. He was a donor. He bought a painting for 3 times its value, then asked me to dinner instead of the artist. I was charmed by his confidence, his easy smile, the way he seemed genuinely interested in my opinions about contemporary art. 6 months later, we were married at the Mitchell family estate on Mercer Island, surrounded by Seattle's elite and my considerably smaller circle of artist friends. The Mitchells were old money, real estate development spanning 3 generations. Nathan worked alongside his father, groomed to eventually take over the family business. I opened my gallery with seed money from my own savings. Nathan had offered to invest, but I'd refused. I wanted something that was entirely mine. For years, our marriage had been good, not perfect, but solid. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our favorite restaurants. We traveled to Europe every summer and spent Christmas with his family at their mountain lodge. We were comfortable. At least that's what I thought until the money disappeared. After the call with the bank, I tried calling Nathan. Straight to voicemail. I texted. Nothing. I called his office. His assistant said he'd taken a personal day. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. Nathan never took personal days. Rebecca arrived at our Queen Anne Victorian 40 minutes after her text. Her eyes were red, her usually immaculate bob slightly disheveled. She embraced me tightly in the foyer. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I just found out yesterday and I couldn't let him do this to you." We sat in the kitchen, the space Nathan and I had renovated together 2 summers ago, arguing playfully about backsplash tiles and cabinet handles. Rebecca's hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. "He's been seeing someone from the sales department for months," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Vanessa Carter, she's 28. Dad found out and threatened to fire her, so Nathan's leaving the company. He told Dad yesterday that he's starting his own firm, with her." I felt oddly calm as the pieces fell into place. The late nights, the business trips that seemed unnecessarily frequent, the new cologne, the classic signs I'd somehow missed, or perhaps chosen not to see. "And the money?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Rebecca looked down. "Startup capital, I assume. Dad refused to back him." I nodded, processing this information with a detachment that surprised me. "Where is he now?" "I don't know for sure. He mentioned something about a condo in Belltown to Dad." I reached for my phone, but Rebecca placed her hand over mine. "There's something else you should know, Olivia." I waited, watching her face, carefully. "Grandpa's trust fund. Nathan thinks he can access it early because of a clause about business ventures. He's meeting with Harold Winters this afternoon to try to get the money released. For the first time since the bank notification, I felt something crack in my composed facade. Harold Winters had been the Mitchell family lawyer for over 30 years. He'd drafted our prenuptial agreement. He'd also become something of a mentor to me over the years, encouraging my interest in art business law. "What time?" I asked. Rebecca checked her watch. 2:00. I stood up, suddenly energized. "I need to make a call." Rebecca looked confused but didn't question me. She understood family loyalty had its limits. After she left, promising to keep me updated, I locked myself in Nathan's home office and called a number I rarely used, but had memorized years ago. Harold Winters' office. "This is Olivia Mitchell. I need to speak with Harold immediately. It's urgent." There was a pause on the line. "Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Winters is preparing for meetings all afternoon. Tell him it's about the Mitchell Family Trust. Tell him Nathan is attempting to access it fraudulently." 15 minutes later, I was driving downtown, Harold's words echoing. In my mind, "Don't say another word over the phone. Meet me at the office at 12:30. Use the back entrance." The law offices of Winters, Bradley and Associates occupied the top floor of an elegant building overlooking Elliott Bay. The receptionist, who'd known me for years, looked surprised to see me coming through the main doors rather than the private entrance Harold had suggested. "Mrs. Mitchell, I thought—" I cut her off with a smile. "Last-minute change of plans. Is Harold in his office?" She nodded, still confused. "Yes, but wonderful. I'll just head back." I walked confidently down the hallway, nodding at associates who greeted me with varying degrees of familiarity. I turned the corner to Harold's office just in time to see Nathan stepping out of the elevator at the far end of the corridor. He was wearing his Navy power suit, the one he saved for important meetings. His hair was freshly cut, his posture relaxed and confident. Until he saw me. The shock on his face was worth every moment of pain I'd felt that morning. He froze mid-stride, briefcase in hand, looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Olivia," he managed, his voice tight. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I had an appointment with Harold. What a coincidence running into you." Nathan's gaze darted toward Harold's closed office door, then back to me. I've been trying to call you." "Have you? How strange. I've been trying to reach you as well, particularly after I received notification that our savings account had been emptied." His face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. Nathan had always been good at regaining his composure. It was what made him effective in business negotiations. "I can explain that," he said, lowering his voice and stepping closer. "It's a temporary business move. I was going to tell you tonight. A $175,000 temporary business move that you didn't think to mention to your wife?" My voice remained calm, almost pleasant. "That seems like quite an oversight, Nathan." His jaw tightened. "It's complicated." "I imagine it is. Almost as complicated as explaining to your wife why you're leaving her for a colleague half her age." That hit home. His eyes widened fractionally before narrowing. "Rebecca," he muttered. I should have known she couldn't keep her mouth shut. "Your sister cares about me, something you apparently no longer do." A door opened behind me. "Olivia? I thought I heard your voice." Harold Winters stood in his doorway, his tall frame still imposing despite his 70 years. His white hair and beard gave him a distinguished appearance that commanded respect throughout Seattle's legal community. "Harold," I said, turning toward him with a genuine smile. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." Harold's eyes moved from me to Nathan, his expression revealing nothing. "Nathan, you're early for your appointment." Nathan straightened, his tie clearly attempting to regain control of the situation. "I had some matters to discuss before our official meeting time." "I see," Harold said. "Well, since both Mitchells are here, Perhaps we should have our discussions together. Come in. I could see panic flash across Nathan's face. Actually, my matter is private. Perhaps Olivia could wait. Nonsense, Harold interrupted, holding the door wider. This concerns both of you. Please come in. Harold's office was exactly as it had always been. Leather-bound law books lining the walls, the smell of old paper and expensive furniture polish, the spectacular view of Puget Sound. I took a seat in one of the client chairs, crossing my legs, and placing my purse on my lap. Nathan reluctantly sat in the chair beside me, leaving a conspicuous gap between us. Harold settled behind his massive desk, adjusting his reading glasses as he opened a leather portfolio. Now, he said, looking at Nathan, I understand you wish to access your portion of the Mitchell family trust ahead of schedule, citing the entrepreneurial clause. Nathan leaned forward, eager. Yes. As I mentioned on the phone, I'm launching a new venture that requires significant capital. Grandfather's trust specifically allows early distribution for business establishment. Harold nodded thoughtfully. Indeed it does, under certain conditions. He turned to me. And Olivia, what brings you here today? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I recently discovered that Nathan has emptied our joint savings account without my knowledge or consent. $175,000 to be exact. Harold's bushy eyebrows rose fractionally. Nathan interjected, That's a personal matter between my wife and me. It has nothing to do with the trust. On the contrary, I said, maintaining my composure. I believe it has everything to do with the trust. Because I believe Nathan is attempting to start a business with another woman with whom he's been having an affair, a woman named Vanessa Carter. The room fell silent. Nathan's breathing became audible, quick and shallow. That's ridiculous, he finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. This is business, not personal. Harold removed his glasses, polishing them carefully with a handkerchief. Nathan, are you familiar with all the conditions of your grandfather's trust? Not just the entrepreneurial clause, but all the conditions? Nathan shifted in his seat. Of course. I've reviewed the documentation many times. Harold placed his glasses back on his nose and slid a document across the desk. Then perhaps you could point out to me where you believe you qualify for early distribution under the current circumstances. Nathan took the document, scanning it quickly. I watched his face carefully, seeing the moment when confusion gave way to doubt, and doubt to realization. This isn't, he began, flipping through the pages frantically. This isn't the version I have. It's the only version that exists, Harold said simply. Your grandfather was quite specific about the trust's conditions. Nathan looked up, a flash of anger crossing his features. What exactly are you saying, Harold? The old lawyer folded his hands on his desk. The entrepreneurial clause does indeed allow for early distribution of trust funds for the purpose of establishing a business. However, there are moral conditions attached. Specifically, Section 12, Paragraph 3 states that no beneficiary may access funds early if they are engaged in conduct unbecoming of the Mitchell family name, including but not limited to adultery, fraudulent financial practices, or criminal activity. I watched as the blood drained from Nathan's face. Furthermore, Harold continued, in the event that such conduct is discovered, control of that portion of the trust transfers temporarily to the beneficiary's spouse, assuming the spouse is not participating in said conduct, until such time as the beneficiary demonstrates a return to good moral character for a period of no less than 5 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan turned to me slowly, comprehension dawning on his face. You knew, he whispered. You knew about this clause. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I simply met his gaze steadily. Harold has been mentoring me in business law for years, Nathan. Did you really think I wouldn't have asked him about the details of your family's trust? Nathan turned back to Harold, desperation now evident in his voice. This is absurd. You can't possibly enforce a morality clause in 2025. It would never hold up in court. Harold shrugged. Perhaps not. Are you prepared to challenge it? To publicly argue that your grandfather's wishes should be invalidated because you want to use his money to start a business with your mistress after emptying your marital savings account without your wife's knowledge. The Mitchell name would certainly make headlines. Nathan's jaw worked silently, his knuckles white as he gripped the arms of his chair. This is how it's going to work, I said quietly. You're going to return my half of our savings account by close of business today. You're going to provide a fair and equitable divorce settlement that accounts for 8 years of marriage. And you're going to do it without dragging either of our names through a public court battle. Or what? Nathan's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Or I will exercise my newly granted control over your trust portion to fund a competing real estate development firm that will specifically target properties your family is interested in. I've learned a lot being married to you, Nathan. I know which projects are in the pipeline, which contractors are reliable, which city council members can be persuaded. And unlike you, I have immediate access to approximately $20 million. His face contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You wouldn't. I absolutely would. I've spent 8 years being the supportive wife, the charming hostess, the woman who set aside her own ambitions to help you achieve yours. Those days are over. Harold cleared his throat. I've taken the liberty of preparing some preliminary paperwork. Olivia, as the temporary controller of Nathan's trust portion, you'll need to sign these documents indicating your acceptance of fiduciary responsibility. He slid a stack of papers toward me. I signed them without hesitation, aware of Nathan's eyes boring into me. This isn't over, Nathan said, his voice low and threatening. I met his gaze calmly. You're right. It's just beginning. As I walked out of Harold's office, my heels clicking rhythmically on the polished floor, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, unadulterated freedom. Nathan had taken our savings, but he'd forgotten something far more valuable. In his family, power was intrinsically tied to morality, and now that power was mine. The Seattle rain greeted me as I stepped onto the sidewalk, cool drops washing away the last remnants of the woman I had been that morning, the betrayed wife, the woman who had missed all the signs. In her place stood someone new, someone stronger, someone who knew exactly what she was worth. I opened my umbrella and hailed a taxi. I had a gallery to run, after all, and now I had an empire to build. The Mitchell Gallery occupied a renovated warehouse in Seattle's Pioneer Square, its exposed brick walls and soaring ceilings the perfect backdrop for the contemporary art I specialized in. By the time I arrived that afternoon, the space was alive with the gentle hum of visitors examining our latest exhibition, a series of large-scale photographs documenting the changing landscape of the Pacific Northwest. Maya, my assistant manager, raised an eyebrow as I hung my rain-soaked coat in my office. You're late, and you look like you've either won the lottery or committed a crime. I laughed, surprising myself with how genuine it sounded. Neither, but it's been an eventful day. Does this have anything to do with Nathan calling 6 times in the last hour? My smile faded. Screen my calls, would you? I need some time to think. Maya nodded, no questions asked. That was why I'd hired her 4 years ago. Sharp, efficient, and discreet. She closed my office door behind her, leaving me alone with the view of rain-slicked cobblestones and the distant ferry terminal. I sank into my chair, the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation with Nathan finally ebbing. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a leather-bound journal, a wedding gift from my mother. I hadn't written in it for years, but today felt like a day that needed documenting. As my pen touched, paper memories flooded back, not just of this morning's discoveries, but of all the small moments that had led to this point. The subtle shifts in our marriage that I'd brushed aside, the gradual distance that had grown between us like a slow-spreading frost. It had started 3 years ago, after the Mitchell Company's annual Christmas gala. Nathan had been unusually quiet on the drive home, staring out at the snow-dusted Seattle streets with a pensive expression I couldn't read. "Something wrong?" I'd asked, removing my earrings as we entered our bedroom. "Dad's stepping down next year," he'd said finally. "He wants me to take over as CEO." I'd crossed the room to embrace him, genuinely excited. "Nathan, that's wonderful. It's what you've been working toward." But instead of returning my enthusiasm, he'd pulled away, loosening his tie with jerky movements. "Is it? Or is it just what everyone has expected of me since I was born?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm 35 years old and I've never made a single choice that wasn't pre-approved by the Mitchell family committee." His voice had an edge I rarely heard. "College, career, even who I—" He stopped abruptly. "Even who you what?" I pressed. "Nothing." He'd sighed, the moment of vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "It's been a long night. Let's just go to bed." That conversation had haunted me for months afterward. I'd tried to bring it up again, to understand what had been left unsaid, but Nathan had erected a wall between us, polite, pleasant, impenetrable. Our marriage continued as before, at least on the surface. We attended the right events, made the right appearances, said the right things. But something essential had changed, a hairline fracture that would eventually split wide open. 6 months later, Nathan started working late. At first, it was once or twice a week, reasonable for someone preparing to take over a major company. Then it became 3 or 4 nights, then weekends. When I suggested we take a vacation, just the two of us, to reconnect, he'd claimed he couldn't possibly get away. "The Milan property is in the final stages," he'd explained, not meeting my eyes. "Dad's counting on me to close this deal." I'd believed him. I'd always believed him. Then came the Christmas party last year. The Mitchell Company had rented out the entire Seattle Art Museum, transforming the modern space into a winter wonderland. I'd worn a midnight blue gown Nathan had never seen, hoping to capture a fragment of the spark that had once existed between us. I was at the bar when I overheard the conversation, 2 junior executives who didn't notice me standing nearby. "Mitchell's playing with fire," one murmured, if his wife knew about Carter. "She's got to suspect something. They're not exactly subtle." "Subtle enough. I heard he's got an apartment downtown, totally off the books." I had stood perfectly still, the champagne flute cold against my fingers as they continued their gossip. Logic told me they could be talking about Annie Mitchell. The family was large, with cousins and uncles throughout the company, but instinct told me otherwise. That night, I had watched Nathan across the crowded room, noting how his eyes frequently drifted to a particular corner where a young woman with copper hair laughed with a group of colleagues. I didn't confront him. Not then. Instead, I'd begun paying attention, really paying attention, to the details I'd been ignoring. The new cologne, the sudden interest in fitness, the mysterious text messages that made him smile in a way he no longer smiled at me, the weeknight client dinners that left his shirt smelling of unfamiliar perfume. One rainy Tuesday in February, after Nathan had called to say he'd be working late again, I'd done something I never thought I would do. I followed him. The gallery closed at 6, and by 6:30 I was parked across from the Mitchell Company, headquarters in a borrowed car, watching the revolving doors through sheets of relentless Seattle rain. Nathan emerged at 7, but instead of heading to his usual parking space, he walked 3 blocks to a trendy new restaurant in Belltown. Through the large front windows, I watched him embrace a woman with copper hair, Vanessa Carter from sales, though I didn't know her name then. The embrace lasted too long, his hand resting too low on her back to be anything but intimate. I didn't go inside. I didn't make a scene. I drove home in silence, parked in our garage, and went through the motions of an ordinary evening. When Nathan came home at 11, claiming exhaustion from budget meetings, I simply nodded and continued reading my book. But that night marked a turning point. As I lay awake beside my sleeping husband, I realized our marriage had become a beautifully constructed facade, impressive from the outside, hollow within. And I began to plan. First, I needed to understand our financial situation exactly. Nathan handled most of our money, a traditional arrangement I'd accepted without much thought. The next day, I visited our bank and requested complete statements for all our accounts for the past year. The picture that emerged was troubling. Large withdrawals, unexplained transfers, a steady diminishment of our joint savings. Not enough to raise immediate alarm, but significant when viewed as a pattern. Nathan was preparing for something. I just didn't know what. Next, I began having regular lunches with Harold Winters, ostensibly to discuss art law as it pertained to the gallery. But our conversations often drifted to trust law, inheritance structures, and specifically, the unique provisions of old family money. The Mitchell Trust is quite interesting, Harold had mentioned during one such lunch. Edward Mitchell, Nathan's grandfather, was something of a visionary when it came to protecting family assets. In what way? I'd asked, trying to sound merely curious. Harold had smiled, his eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. Let's just say he believed wealth should follow moral character. Not a popular position these days, but legally binding. Nonetheless. I'd filed that information away, sensing its importance without knowing exactly how or when I might need it. My third step had been to cultivate a relationship with Rebecca, Nathan's younger sister. Unlike her brother, Rebecca had rejected the family business, choosing instead to teach environmental science at the University of Washington. She had always been friendly toward me, but we'd never been close. I changed that, inviting her to gallery events, meeting for coffee, gradually earning her trust. Nathan's different lately, she'd confided during one of our coffee dates. Dad's worried, says he's making impulsive decisions, questioning long-standing company strategies. He's under a lot of pressure, I'd replied neutrally. Rebecca had studied me over her latte. It's more than that. There are rumors, Olivia. There are always rumors. These are specific, about a woman in the sales department. I'd kept my expression carefully blank. I see. Do you? Because if my brother is being an idiot, you deserve to know. I'd reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you. But Nathan and I are fine. It was the first direct lie I'd told about our marriage, and it had tasted bitter on my tongue. But I needed time. Time to understand the full extent of Nathan's deception. Time to protect myself from whatever was coming. The final piece had fallen into place 3 months ago during a dinner at the Mitchell family estate. Nathan's father, Charles, had pulled me aside after the meal, his weathered face grave. Olivia, I want you to know that whatever happens with the company, with Nathan, you'll always have a place in this family. The statement had been cryptic, loaded with unspoken meaning. I'd thanked him, uncertain how to respond. Later that night, I'd overheard an argument between Nathan and his father, hushed, intense words about responsibilities and legacy and throwing everything away. By the time the bank notification had chimed on my phone this morning, I had already assembled the puzzle pieces of my husband's betrayal. I just hadn't expected him to make such a bold move so soon. The emptying of our savings account had accelerated. My timeline forced my hand. But in some ways, it was a relief. The waiting was over. The time for action had arrived. A knock on my office door pulled me from my reflections. Maya poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here. To see you. Says it's important. Nathan? No. A woman. Vanessa Carter. My pen froze mid-sentence. Send her in. Maya hesitated. Are you sure? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine. Please, send her in. Seconds later, she appeared in my doorway, the woman from the restaurant, the owner of the copper hair and unfamiliar perfume. In person, she was younger than I had expected, wearing an expensive suit that looked newly purchased, her makeup flawless but heavy-handed, as if she were trying too hard to project sophistication. Mrs. Mitchell, she said, her voice steady, despite the slight tremor in her hands. Thank you for seeing me. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Ms. Carter, this is unexpected. She sat down, crossing her legs and adjusting her skirt with practiced precision. I imagine it is. Nathan doesn't know I'm here. I gathered as much. Vanessa studied me, her green eyes calculating. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone angry, hysterical maybe. Not. She gestured vaguely at me. This. I leaned back in my chair. Did you come here to assess my emotional state, Ms. Carter? No. She took a deep breath. I came to make you an offer. This was unexpected. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. Nathan told me about what happened at the lawyer's office, about the trust fund and the moral clause. Her lips curled around the phrase with distaste. He's upset. I imagine he is. He says you're being vindictive, that you're using an archaic condition to punish him for falling in love with someone else. I almost laughed at that. Is that what he told you? That this is about love? Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, perhaps. We are in love. We're starting a life together. With my money. Her chin lifted defiantly. The money is just to get us started. Our business plan is solid. Once we're established— Ms. Carter, I interrupted gently. Why are you here? She reached into her designer handbag and withdrew an envelope, placing it on my desk. $500,000. It's yours if you sign control of the trust back to Nathan. Now I did laugh, the sound echoing off the brick walls of my office. You're offering me my own money? She frowned. It's not your money. It's from investors who believe in our vision. What investors? A flicker of hesitation crossed her features. That's confidential. Of course it is. I pushed the envelope back toward her without opening it. Ms. Carter, I'm afraid you've made a wasted trip. I have no intention of signing anything. Be reasonable, she urged, leaning forward. Nathan is prepared to be generous in the divorce settlement. This could all be over quickly, cleanly. You could move on with your life. I studied her face, young, beautiful, earnest in her conviction that she was the protagonist in this story. I almost felt sorry for her. Tell me something, I said. When Nathan told you about our savings account, what did he say? She blinked, caught off guard by the question. He said you had agreed to invest in our startup, that you were supportive of our relationship. I nodded slowly. And you believed that. Why wouldn't I? Nathan wouldn't lie to me. There it was. The naivete that Nathan had exploited. The same blind trust I had once given him. Ms. Carter, Vanessa, I said, softening my tone, I'm not your enemy here, but I think you should know that Nathan withdrew our entire savings without my knowledge or consent. $175,000 that we had saved together over 8 years of marriage. Money that represented our shared future. Her perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. That's not. He wouldn't. She stopped, uncertainty clouding her expression. Did he tell you about the conditions of the trust fund before this morning? She hesitated, then shook her head. Did he mention that his father had threatened to fire you from the company? Another hesitation. He said his father was being unreasonable about our relationship. That's why we're starting our own firm. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my desk. Vanessa, I want you to consider something carefully. If Nathan would lie to his wife of 8 years, empty their joint account, and attempt to access a trust fund under false pretenses, what makes you certain he's telling you the truth now? Her breathing quickened, her carefully applied blush now stark against suddenly pale skin. You're just trying to turn me against him. This is a trick. Is it? Ask him about the apartment. In Belltown. The one he's kept off the books for the past year. Her eyes widened fractionally. How did you know about it? The same way I know about the weekend trips to Vancouver while I thought he was at business conferences. The same way I know about the credit card in his mother's maiden name that he uses for expenses he doesn't want traced. She stood abruptly, gathering her bag. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't. But before you leave, ask yourself. One question. If Nathan is willing to steal from me, what might he eventually be willing to take from you? Her lips pressed into a thin line. She snatched the envelope from my desk and turned to leave, her expensive heels clicking sharply across the hardwood floor. At the door, she paused. You know nothing about our relationship, she said without turning around. Perhaps not, I conceded. But I know Nathan, and that's something you can't claim yet. After she left, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing the encounter. Her visit had confirmed what I had suspected. Nathan was scrambling, looking for ways to regain control. Sending Vanessa had been a miscalculation on his part. He'd underestimated me again, assuming I would be intimidated or manipulated by his new partner. My phone buzzed with a text from Harold. Wire transfer confirmed. Your portion of the savings has been returned. One small victory. But the war was just beginning. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I'd been compiling for months, a detailed plan for a real estate development firm specializing in sustainable, community-focused projects. The antithesis of the Mitchell Company's luxury high-rises and exclusive commercial properties. I'd created it as a thought experiment, a way to channel my frustration into something productive. Now, with $20 million from Nathan's trust at my disposal, it could become reality. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had never run a company, never made business decisions involving such large sums. But I had spent 8 years watching Nathan, learning the industry through osmosis, building connections with architects, contractors and city officials who respected me in my own right. More importantly, I knew exactly which properties the Mitchell Company had been quietly investigating for future development. Nathan had never been careful about the documents he left scattered around his home office, never imagining I would pay attention to the details. As I reviewed my notes, another text came through, this one from Rebecca. N showed up at Dad's office demanding intervention. Dad refused. N stormed out. Family dinner canceled. The Mitchell family closing ranks, not around Nathan as he would have expected, but around their principles. Charles Mitchell might have been disappointed by my knowledge of the trust conditions, but he respected the rule of law above all else. If Nathan had violated the moral clause, he would face the consequences, son or not. I was about to respond to Rebecca when my office door flew open. Nathan stood in the doorway, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his face flushed with anger. You had no right, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Maya appeared behind him, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry, Olivia. He pushed past me. It's all right, Maya. Mr. Mitchell was just leaving. Like hell I am. Nathan stepped further. Into the office, closing the door behind him. We need to talk. I stood, maintaining the desk as a barrier between us. I think we said everything that needed saying at Harold's office. You humiliated me, he hissed. You went behind my back, conspired with my family's lawyer, and now you think you can control my inheritance? My birthright? Your birthright. Comes with conditions, Nathan. Conditions you knew about and chose to ignore. He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. This is insane. One moral slip and suddenly everything I've worked for is in jeopardy? One moral slip? I repeated incredulously. You emptied our joint account without my knowledge. You've been living a double life for at least a year. You were planning to leave me with nothing while you started over with your girlfriend. And you call that one moral slip? It wasn't like that, he insisted, his tone shifting to something more placating. I was going to make it right. The money was just temporary. A loan. And us, Olivia. We haven't been happy for a long time. You know that. What I know is that instead of having an honest conversation about our marriage, you chose deception. Instead of a fair division of assets, you chose theft. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to the persuasive tone he used in difficult negotiations. Olivia, be reasonable. This trust fund situation is an overreaction. We can work this out like adults. I'll return your half of the savings. You already have, I interrupted. Harold confirmed the wire transfer. That stopped him short. You're working fast. I learned from the best. His eyes narrowed, calculating. What do you want, Olivia? Really? Is this about money? Because we can reach a settlement that's more than fair. Is it about the gallery? I'll sign over my interest completely. You never had an interest in the gallery, Nathan. It's always been mine. Then what? Revenge? Is that what this is about? Making me suffer because I fell in love with someone else? I studied him. This man I had devoted 8 years of my life to. This stranger who now stood before me playing the victim in a tragedy of his own making. This isn't about revenge, I said finally. It's about consequences. For perhaps the first time in your life, your actions have real consequences. And I'm not going to shield you from them. His expression hardened. You have no idea what you're doing. Running a development company isn't like hanging pretty pictures on walls. You'll fail, and you'll destroy my inheritance in the process. I smiled, genuinely amused by his condescension. Perhaps. But that's my risk to take now, isn't it? For the next 5 years, at least. 5 years, he repeated, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. You can't seriously intend to hold my trust hostage for 5 years. Not hostage, Nathan, protected. From you. Until you demonstrate the moral character your grandfather believed was necessary to steward the family wealth. He stared at me, a mixture of disbelief and newfound wariness in his eyes. I don't even know who you are anymore. Funny, I replied. I was just thinking the same thing about you. For a long moment, we regarded each other across the desk. The ruins of our marriage spread between us like a chasm too wide to bridge. Then Nathan straightened, adjusting his suit jacket with a gesture that signaled he was retreating behind his public persona. This isn't over, he said, echoing his earlier threat at Harold's office. No, I agreed. But the terms have changed. And I suggest you adjust your expectations accordingly. After he left, I sank back into my chair, the weight of the confrontation settling over me. My hands were steady, my resolve firm, but a hollow ache had formed in my chest, not for the man who had just left, but for the woman I had been. The gyai. Trusting wife, the supportive partner, the person who had believed in the sanctity of promises made. That woman was gone now, transformed by betrayal into someone stronger, more cautious, more determined. As I turned back to my laptop, to the plans that would shape my new future, I realized that Nathan had given me an unexpected gift, the freedom to reinvent myself completely. Outside my window, the Seattle rain continued to fall, washing the Mao city clean. Tomorrow would be a new day, the first of many in a life I was finally taking control of, and for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to see what it would bring. The morning after Nathan's confrontation at the gallery, I awoke before dawn in our Queen Anne Victorian. The house felt different somehow, emptier despite Nathan's absence being nothing new. I'd grown accustomed to sleeping alone during his late nights at the office, but this was different. This emptiness was permanent. I padded downstairs in my robe, the hardwood floors cold beneath my bare feet. In the kitchen, I made coffee and watched the sunrise paint the Seattle skyline in hues of pink and gold. Mount Rainier loomed in the distance, its snow-capped peak catching the first light of day. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. My phone chimed with an email notification. Harold had sent over the official documents transferring control of Nathan's trust to me, along with a detailed inventory of assets. I scanned the list, my coffee growing cold beside me. $22 million. Commercial real estate holdings. Across 3 states. A significant stake in the Mitchell family's private investment fund. And a seat on the board of the Mitchell Foundation, the family's charitable organization. It was far more than Nathan had ever disclosed to me. In all our years of marriage, he'd been vague about his inheritance, mentioning only that it would eventually come to him. He'd implied it was a modest sum, nothing that would dramatically change our lives. Another lie in a marriage built on deception. My phone rang as I was reviewing the documents. Rebecca. "Have you seen it?" she asked without preamble. "Seen what?" "Check your email. Charles sent something to the entire family this morning." I switched to my email app and found a message from Nathan's father, sent to a distribution list that included all Mitchell family members, and apparently still me. The email was brief and to the point. To all concerned parties, as of yesterday, Nathan Mitchell is no longer employed by Mitchell Development Group. All ongoing projects previously under his management have been reassigned. His access to company, systems, and properties has been revoked. Additionally, Nathan will not be attending family functions until further notice. Olivia remains a valued member of this family, and I expect everyone to treat her with the respect she deserves during this difficult time. Charles Mitchell, Chairman and CEO, Mitchell Development Group. I read it twice, trying to process the implications. Nathan hadn't just lost control of his trust fund, he'd been cut off from the family business entirely. "Did you know he was going to do this?" I asked Rebecca. "Not until last night. Dad called a family meeting, without Nathan, obviously. He said Nathan had betrayed the company's values and couldn't be trusted with its future. That seems extreme." Rebecca's laugh was humorless. "You don't know the half of it. Apparently, Nathan has been making unauthorized promises to potential clients, signing preliminary agreements that undercut our standard terms. Dad thinks he's been preparing to poach major accounts for his new venture." I closed my eyes, a wave of weariness washing over me. Even I hadn't suspected Nathan would go that far. "There's more," Rebecca continued, her voice lowering. "Vanessa, Carter didn't just show up at Mitchell Development by chance. She was previously employed by Westridge Properties, our biggest competitor. Dad thinks she may have been placed deliberately to gain inside information." "You're saying she's a corporate spy?" "Maybe, or maybe she just saw an opportunity in Nathan and took it. Either way, Dad's furious. He's having legal review every project Nathan has touched in the past 18 months. I thought about Vanessa's visit to my gallery, her confidence, her calculated approach. It made more sense now. Not just a desperate woman trying to salvage her relationship, but someone with a deeper agenda. "Has anyone heard from Nathan since yesterday?" I asked. "He's not answering calls. Mom's worried, but Dad says he made his choices." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Nathan hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed his entire family, the company that bore his name, the legacy he'd been born to protect. For what? A new business venture with a woman who might have been using him all along? It didn't make sense. Not for the methodical, status-conscious man I'd married. Something was missing from this puzzle. Some piece I couldn't yet see. My contemplation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the front door. Through the frosted glass, I could make out a tall, broad-shouldered figure that was distinctly not Nathan. When I opened the door, Charles Mitchell stood on my porch, looking older than his 60 years. His silver hair was perfectly combed as always, his tailored suit impeccable, but new lines had formed around his eyes overnight. "Olivia," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, gesturing him into the foyer. It struck me as strange that he would ask permission to enter a house that his family money had likely helped purchase, despite it being solely in my name. "Coffee?" I offered, leading him to the kitchen. "Please." We sat at the breakfast nook, morning light streaming through the windows as I poured him a cup from the French press. Charles added a splash of cream, stirring methodically before looking up to meet my gaze. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. For what? For not seeing who my son truly is? For not warning you when I began to suspect? He took a sip of coffee, his hands steady despite the emotion in his voice. "I thought Nathan was just going through a phase, midlife restlessness, temporary poor judgment. I convinced myself he would come to his senses." "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" Charles set down his cup. "About a year ago. Financial irregularities in projects he was managing. Nothing major, just discrepancies. Expenses that didn't quite add up. Meetings with clients that weren't properly documented." "Why didn't you confront him?" "I did, in my way. Asked questions. Requested more detailed reports. He always had explanations, plausible ones." Charles shook his head. "I wanted to believe him. He's my son." The raw pain in his voice was unexpected. Charles Mitchell had always seemed like the embodiment of rational business acumen. More CEO than father. But now I saw the man beneath the title, struggling with the betrayal of his only son. "Then Vanessa Carter appeared in the sales department," Charles continued. "Highly recommended by one of our VPs. Impressive resume. She and Nathan began working closely on the Lake Union project." "When did you realize they were involved?" "Not until 3 months ago. Nathan had always been discreet with his indiscretions." He looked up sharply. "Did you know there were others? Before Miss Carter?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "No," I managed. "I didn't." Charles nodded, unsurprised. "Nathan has always compartmentalized his life effectively. It's what made him good at business, and apparently, good at deception." I tried to process this new information, to reconcile it with the man I'd thought I knew. "How many?" "That I know of. 2 others during your marriage. Brief affairs, quickly ended. Nothing that threatened his position or the company." He hesitated. "I should have said something to you, but they seemed like mistakes, lapses in judgment, not patterns. Until Vanessa. Yes, she was different. He became reckless, making decisions that endangered projects, relationships with clients." Charles's hands tightened around his coffee cup. When I confronted him directly about their relationship, he didn't deny it. Instead, he told me I had no right to interfere in his personal life, that the company's moral standards were outdated, restrictive. That doesn't sound like Nathan. No, it doesn't. That's what truly alarmed me. It was like speaking to a stranger wearing my son's face. We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in our private recollections of a man who had deceived us in different ways. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally asked. Charles met my gaze directly. "Because you now control a significant portion of the family's assets, and I need to know what you intend to do with that responsibility." So there it was. Not just a father-in-law offering comfort, but a businessman protecting his interests. I should have expected nothing less from Charles Mitchell. I intend to use those assets responsibly, I said carefully. I have no desire to damage the Mitchell family or its enterprises. But you do intend to start your own development company, he stated. It wasn't a question. I raised an eyebrow. Harold talks too much. Harold is loyal to the Mitchell family. As trustees, we're entitled to know how the assets will be deployed. And if you don't approve of my plans? Charles's expression remained impassive. The moral clause gives you control, not ownership. We can't prevent you from using the assets, but we can monitor their use. I felt a flicker of irritation. You think I would mismanage them? I think you're angry, hurt, and suddenly in possession of significant resources. That combination can lead to impulsive decisions. Like starting a competing development. Firm to spite your son? The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Is that your intention? I considered the question seriously. Was I motivated purely by revenge? The desire to hurt Nathan as he had hurt me? No, I said finally. I'm motivated by something else entirely. And what's that? The opportunity to build something meaningful. Something that reflects my values, not just the Mitchell family's. Pursuit of profit. Charles studied me for a long moment. You've always been more than just Nathan's wife, haven't you? I sensed that from the beginning. Yet you never treated me that way. No, he acknowledged. I didn't. Another apology. I owe you? He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the table. It belonged to Elaine Matsuda, Executive Vice President of Development at Mitchell Group. Elaine has been with us for 20 years. She's brilliant, ethical, and understands Seattle real estate better than anyone I know. Charles tapped the card. If you're serious about starting your own venture, talk to her first. Not as Nathan's wife or my daughter-in-law, but as a businesswoman with a vision. I picked up the card, surprised by the gesture. Why would you help me compete with your own company? Who said anything about competition? Charles stood, straightening his suit jacket. Seattle has room for more than one vision of development, perhaps especially one that doesn't bear the Mitchell name but carries its better values. He left soon after, leaving me with more questions than answers. Was he offering genuine support, or was this a subtle way of monitoring my activities? Keeping your friends close, but your enemies closer. I didn't have time to analyze Charles's motives. My phone was already buzzing with a text from Maya. Emergency at the gallery. Pipe burst in storage room. Need you ASAP. The next few hours were a blur of water damage assessment, insurance calls, and coordinating emergency art conservation for several pieces that had been affected. It was nearly evening by the time I returned home, exhausted and distracted, which is perhaps why I didn't immediately notice the signs of intrusion. The slightly ajar kitchen door, the faint scuff marks on the hardwood floor. It wasn't until I entered the living room and found Nathan sitting in the darkness that I realized something was wrong. Jesus! I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. What are you doing here? He didn't answer immediately. In the dimness, I could make out a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. My whiskey, from the bar cabinet we'd bought in Barcelona on our 5th anniversary. You changed the locks, he said finally, his voice unnervingly calm. Yes. I remained standing, my hand hovering near my phone in my pocket. How did you get in? I still have the security code for the kitchen door. He took a sip of whiskey. You should change that too. I reached for the light switch, but Nathan stopped me. Don't, please. Something in his tone made me pause. What do you want, Nathan? To understand how everything fell apart so quickly. He leaned forward, his face catching a sliver of light from the street lamps outside. His eyes were bloodshot, his usually clean-shaven face stubbled. Yesterday morning I had everything, a wife, a career, a future. Today, I have nothing. You made choices, I said, keeping my voice steady. Choices that led to consequences. Did I? He laughed, a hollow sound. Or was I maneuvered into a corner so skillfully that I never saw it coming? A chill ran down my spine. What are you talking about? My father didn't just fire me, Olivia. He's frozen all my accounts. Every credit card, canceled. My personal checking account, emptied. Even my car has been repossessed. Company property, apparently. Nathan swirled the amber liquid in his glass. It's like I've been erased. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy. I'm sorry. Are you? He looked up, his gaze sharpening. Or is this exactly what you wanted? I didn't ask your father to cut you off, Nathan. No, but you went to Harold behind my back. You activated the moral clause. You took control of my trust. After you emptied our savings account, I reminded him. After you lied and betrayed me for months. He stood suddenly, moving toward me with a fluidity that belied the amount of alcohol he'd likely consumed. I need you to give it back. I took a step backward. Give what back? Control of the trust. Sign it back to me. Today. The desperation in his voice was palpable, almost frightening. You know I can't do that. The conditions are clear. 5 years, or until you demonstrate moral character. I don't have 5 years. His voice rose, echoing in the silent house. I need it now. Why? For your new business with Vanessa? The startup capital you stole from our account wasn't enough? Nathan raked a hand through his disheveled hair. This isn't about the business, it's about staying alive. Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic, he snapped. I owe people money, Olivia. People who don't send polite collection notices. I stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. What kind of people? The kind who break fingers first and ask questions later. He sank back onto the couch, suddenly looking defeated. I made some investments. Off the books. High risk, high reward. It was supposed to be straightforward. Triple my money in 6 months. Gambling, I said flatly. You were gambling with our future. It wasn't gambling. It was a calculated risk. That went wrong. He nodded, staring into his glass. The first investment paid off, spectacularly. So I went bigger the second time, and the third, but the fourth. He trailed off. How much do you owe? 2 million, due in 48 hours. The number hung in the air between us, staggering in its magnitude. Who would loan you that kind of money? Not loan sharks, if that's what you're thinking. Private investors. Very private. Very exclusive. He looked up, his eyes haunted. They don't advertise in the yellow pages. Does Vanessa know about this? A bitter smile crossed his face. Vanessa is gone. Packed her things this morning, left me a note saying she needs space to rethink our relationship. Convenient timing. Something clicked in my mind. Rebecca's words about Vanessa possibly being a corporate spy, her calculated approach at the gallery, the sudden abandonment of Nathan when he lost his position and family connections. She used you, I said quietly. Maybe. Or maybe she just realized I'm not the golden ticket she thought I was. Nathan drained his glass. Either way, I'm alone. No job, no money, no girlfriend. Just debt and a countdown clock. What happens if you don't pay? His laugh was chilling. Best case? They take everything I own, which at this point is basically the clothes I'm wearing. Worst case? He made a gun shape with his fingers, pointing it at his temple. Stop it, I said sharply. This isn't a movie, Nathan. No, it's worse, because in movies there's usually a last-minute reprieve. He stood again, moving to refill his glass from the bar cabinet. That's why I need the trust fund. Just enough. To clear this debt, then you can have control back. I'll sign whatever you want. I watched him pour another 2 fingers of whiskey, trying to reconcile this desperate man with the confident, controlled husband I'd known for 8 years. Had he always been this person underneath the polished exterior? Or had something broken inside him, leading to the spiral of deception and recklessness? I can't just sign over control, I said finally. There are procedures, trustees who would have to approve. Then give me the $2 million as an investment from the trust. You have that authority now. In what? Your mysterious high-risk venture that's already failed once? Nathan slammed the glass down, liquid sloshing over the sides. Damn it, Olivia. This isn't a negotiation. I need that money, or I'm dead. His outburst hung in the air between us, the first time in our marriage he'd ever raised his voice to me. I should have been frightened, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't my problem to solve. This wasn't my mess to clean up. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Did you hear what I just said? These people will kill me. Then go to the police. Nathan laughed harshly. With what evidence? I have nothing on paper, no proof, just verbal agreements with people who officially don't exist. Then go to your father. I tried. He thinks I'm making it up to get access to funds. I studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception. Nathan had always been an excellent liar. I knew that better than anyone. Was this another manipulation? A fabricated crisis to regain control of his trust? How do I know this is real? I asked. You don't. He shrugged, suddenly calm again. You can't. You'll just have to take my word for it. Your word doesn't mean much to me anymore, Nathan. He flinched as if I'd struck him. I know, I deserve that. But Olivia, I swear to you, this is real. The danger is real. I walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. Elegant homes, manicured gardens, the comfortable security of affluence. How quickly that security could be shattered. Even if I believed you, I said without turning around, I can't just hand over $2 million from your trust. The trustees would question it. Your father would intervene. There must be something you can do. The desperation was back in his voice. Some way to access the funds without raising alarms. I turned to face him. Why would I help you, Nathan, after everything you've done? Because despite it all, you're not the kind of person who would let someone die if you could prevent it. He took a step toward me. Even someone who hurt you? The worst part was that he was right. I couldn't simply turn my back if his danger was genuine, no matter how much he deserved to face the consequences of his actions. I need to think, I said finally, and I need you to leave, now. He hesitated, then nodded. I'm staying at the Fairmont downtown, room 1214. I have until Friday at midnight. After he left, I sank onto the couch, the lingering scent of his cologne mixing with whiskey in the air. My mind raced with questions, doubts, competing instincts. Was Nathan telling the truth about the debt? About the danger? Or was this elaborate theater designed to manipulate me yet again? I needed more information, and I knew exactly who might have it. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a quiet corner of Canlis Restaurant, waiting for Harold Winters. The elegant space overlooked Lake Union, the city lights reflecting on the dark water like scattered stars. It was the kind of restaurant Nathan and I had frequented in happier times, where the staff recognized us and remembered our preferences. Harold arrived precisely on time, as he always did. He ordered a martini and listened silently as I recounted Nathan's visit and his claims. Is it possible? I asked when I'd finished. Could he really be involved with the kind of people he's describing? Harold sipped his drink thoughtfully. It's more than possible. It's likely. What do you mean? About a year ago, Nathan approached me about setting up a private investment entity, something separate from the Mitchell family interests. Nothing unusual about that. Many of my clients maintain diverse portfolios, but the structure he requested was concerning. In what way? Multiple shell companies, offshore accounts, the kind of arrangement typically used to obscure the movement of funds. Harold set down his glass. I declined to assist him, told him it crossed ethical lines I wasn't comfortable with. Did you tell his father? Attorney-client privilege prevented me from sharing the specifics. But I did suggest to Charles that he review Nathan's financial activities more closely. I absorbed this information, the pieces of Nathan's deception becoming clearer. So, you believe he could be in genuine danger? If he's been dealing with the kind of investors I suspect, then yes. These aren't traditional venture capitalists. Olivia, they operate in shadows, prey on desperate or greedy individuals with promises of extraordinary returns. And when those returns don't materialize? Harold's expression was grave. They protect their investments by any means necessary. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been forming since Nathan's visit. If I wanted to help him, just enough to clear this debt and nothing more, how would I do it without compromising control of the trust? Harold studied me with surprise. You're considering helping him after everything he's done. I'm considering preventing violence if his story is true. That's not the same as forgiving him. Harold nodded slowly. There might be a way. The trust allows for humanitarian distributions in cases of medical emergency or personal safety. It's a provision rarely used, but it exists. And it wouldn't require me to relinquish control. No, it would be a one-time disbursement, documented, as necessary for Nathan's physical well-being. I turned my wine glass slowly, watching the burgundy liquid catch the light. I would need verification, proof that the threat is real, that the money would actually resolve it. That could be arranged. I have contacts who could make inquiries discreetly. How quickly? 24 hours, maybe less. I nodded. Do it. And Harold? Yes? Don't tell Nathan. If this is another manipulation, I want to know before any money changes hands. Harold's smile was grim. Of course. And Olivia? Yes? Whatever happens, remember that you are not responsible for Nathan's choices or their consequences. Helping him doesn't change that fundamental truth. As I drove home through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle, Harold's words echoed in my mind. I was not responsible for Nathan's choices. I could choose to help him without forgiving him, without returning to the life we'd shared. The Victorian was dark and silent when I arrived, exactly as I'd left it. But something felt different, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a sense of being watched that raised the hair on the back of my neck. I hesitated at the front door, keys in hand, suddenly reluctant to enter. Instead, I backed away and returned to my car. I would stay at a hotel tonight. Tomorrow, I would have answers. Tomorrow, I would decide whether Nathan's life was worth $2 million of his own money. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror at the house Nathan and I had once called home. It stood dark against the night sky, a monument to a life that no longer existed. For the first time since the morning's bank notification, I felt a profound sense of loss, not for Nathan or our marriage, but for the woman I had been. The trusting, supportive wife who had built her life around someone else's dreams. That woman was gone forever, replaced by someone harder, more cautious, more self-reliant. And despite everything, I couldn't regret the transformation. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel lobby gleamed with old-world elegance, crystal chandeliers, marble, floors, and the quiet efficiency of staff who had perfected the art of discretion. I sat in a plush armchair near the grand staircase, watching the entrance while trying to appear casual. Harold was 20 minutes late, which was so unlike him that I'd already called his office twice. His assistant assured me he was on his way. When he finally arrived, his normally immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled. His tie was askew, and he carried his briefcase like it contained explosives. "I apologize for the delay," he said, sinking into the chair opposite mine. "There have been developments? Good or bad?" Harold glanced around the lobby before leaning closer. "Both. My contacts confirmed Nathan's story. He does indeed owe a substantial sum to some very dangerous individuals. The deadline is real. The consequences of default would be severe." Despite having suspected as much, hearing the confirmation sent a chill through me. So he wasn't lying about that. No, but there's more to the story. Harold opened his briefcase and withdrew a manila folder, handing it to me. "These arrived at my office an hour ago. Anonymous delivery." I opened the folder to find photographs, dozens of them. Nathan and Vanessa in various locations, entering hotel rooms, dining in restaurants I'd never seen, walking through an upscale condo building. The timestamps on the images spanned more than a year. "Someone has been watching them," I said, flipping through the images. "Not someone. Westridge Properties." I looked up sharply. "The competitor Charles mentioned? The one who supposedly planted Vanessa at Mitchell Development?" Harold nodded. "These photos came with documents, emails between Vanessa and executives at Westridge. She was hired specifically to gain access to Mitchell Development's strategic plans. Nathan was the target. They seduced him to steal company secrets?" "Initially, yes, but it appears the relationship evolved into something more complicated." Harold pointed to a set of emails in the folder. "Vanessa began sharing information with Nathan about Westridge's own development plans. They were playing both sides. I skimmed the emails, trying to follow the convoluted threads of deception. So they were double agents? Stealing from Mitchell? Development for Westridge, then stealing from Westridge for themselves? Essentially, they were gathering proprietary information from both companies to launch their own competing firm. That's what the money was for. Not just startup capital, but purchasing strategic properties before either company could move on them. And the dangerous investors? Where do they fit in? Harold's expression darkened. That's where it gets worse. The investors Nathan borrowed from have connections to both Mitchell Development and Westridge. They're not just loan sharks. They're silent partners in major real estate deals throughout the Northwest. When they discovered Nathan and Vanessa's scheme, they called in the debt immediately. "To protect their other interests," I murmured, the pieces falling into place. But why would Nathan borrow from people connected to his father's business? In the first place? That seems incredibly risky. Nathan didn't know about the connection. These investors operate through multiple shell corporations, and they're careful about keeping their true identities hidden from borrowers. Harold adjusted his glasses. "I believe they sought Nathan out deliberately, offering terms that seemed too good to refuse." "A trap," I said, the realization dawning. "They set him up to fail." Perhaps. Or perhaps they simply recognized an opportunity in a reckless man with access to valuable information. I closed the folder, my mind racing. Does Vanessa know about these investors? About the danger Nathan is in? According to my sources, she disappeared completely after leaving Nathan. Cleared out her apartment, terminated her lease, disconnected her phone. She knew exactly what she was doing. "And left Nathan holding the bag," I said bitterly. Even after everything, I felt a flicker of sympathy for my husband. Betrayed by his lover just as he had betrayed me. "There's one more thing," Harold said, his voice dropping lower. "The $2 million Nathan needs? It's not the full amount he owes. It's just enough to buy him time. Another month, maybe 2. How much does he really owe? $5 million at minimum. Possibly more." I sat back, stunned. So even if I help him now, he'll still be in danger, yes, just not immediate danger. The implications were staggering. Nathan had entangled himself so thoroughly in webs of deception that there was no simple escape. Even with my help, he would still be hunted, still vulnerable. Have you told him what you've discovered? I asked. Harold shook his head. I wanted to speak with you first. What about his father? Charles should know that corporate espionage was involved. I've scheduled a meeting with him tomorrow morning. These documents will be turned over to Mitchell Developments Legal. I nodded, trying to think clearly through the chaos of revelations. So what do we do about Nathan? About the money? Harold studied me, his expression grave. That remains your decision, Olivia. I can arrange the humanitarian distribution from the trust, as we discussed. Or what? Or you can walk away. Let Nathan face the consequences of his actions. As harsh as it sounds, this is a mess of his own making. I stared at the folder in my lap, images of Nathan and Vanessa's betrayal captured in glossy 8x10s. I should hate him. I should want him to suffer. But the thought of violence, even against someone who had hurt me so deeply, still turned my stomach. I need to see him, I said finally. Talk to him directly. He deserves to know what we've discovered before I make any decision. Harold nodded, unsurprised. I thought you might say that. Do you want me to come with you? No. This needs to be between Nathan and me. Be careful, Olivia. Nathan is desperate, and desperate people are unpredictable. I left the lobby with the folder tucked securely in my bag, my steps echoing on the marble floor. The elevator ride to the 12th floor gave me time to compose myself, to rehearse what I would say to the man who had once been the center of my world. Room 1214 was at the end of a long hallway. I knocked firmly, prepared to wait, but the door opened almost immediately. Nathan stood there in wrinkled clothes, his eyes bloodshot and wary. Olivia, he said, surprise evident in his voice. I didn't expect to see you. We need to talk. I pushed past him into the suite, which was in disarray, room service trays cluttering the desk, clothes strewn across furniture, an open laptop surrounded by scattered papers. Please, come in, he said dryly, closing the door behind me. I turned to face him, taking in his disheveled appearance. The polished executive I'd married was nowhere to be seen in this rumpled, unshaven man. Harold confirmed your story, I said without preamble. About the debt. About the danger. Relief washed over his features. Then you'll help me? You'll release the funds? Not so fast. I withdrew the folder from my bag and tossed it onto the coffee table. You should take a look at these first. Nathan approached cautiously, as if the folder might bite. He opened it, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he flipped through the photographs and documents. Where did you get these? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. They were delivered to Harold's office today. Anonymous sender. Nathan sank onto the couch, still holding the incriminating evidence of his double life. This is... I can explain. Save it, I cut him off. I'm not interested in explanations or excuses. What I want to know is this. Did you know Vanessa was working for Westridge when you started your affair with her? He hesitated, then shook his head. Not at first. I discovered it about 3 months in. And instead of ending things, you decided to become a corporate spy yourself? Steal from your family's company? Betray your father? Your legacy? Nathan laughed bitterly. My legacy? Do you have any idea what it's like living in Charles Mitchell's shadow? Being the dutiful son, the perfect heir, never making a decision? That wasn't subject to his approval? So this was rebellion? Destroying your life to spite your father? It wasn't like that. Nathan ran a hand through his disheveled hair. When I found out about Vanessa's connection to Westridge, I was going to end it. But then she showed me what they were planning, developments that would directly compete with our projects, properties they were targeting that we had overlooked. I saw an opportunity to double-cross both companies and start your own. He nodded slowly. It was supposed to be brilliant. We would have inside information on both Mitchell Development and Westridge. We could anticipate their moves, outmaneuver them both. And the investors? The people who now want you dead? Nathan's confidence faltered. That was a miscalculation. We needed capital quickly to secure key properties. Traditional lenders would have taken too long, required too much documentation. These investors offered cash with minimal questions. Did you know they were connected to your father's business? His head snapped up. What? No, that's impossible. I gestured. To the folder. It's all there, Nathan. The shell companies, the connections. They knew exactly who you were and what you were planning. They weren't just lending you money. They were monitoring you. Nathan scrambled through the documents, his face draining of color as he verified what I'd told him. This can't be right. Vanessa vetted them. She said they were independent, no connections to either company. Vanessa lied. To both of us. He looked up, realization dawning. She set me up, used me to get information, then left me holding the debt when it all fell apart. It certainly looks that way. Nathan stood abruptly, pacing the room with agitated energy. I need to find her. She's the only one who can confirm where these investors came from, what their real agenda is. Vanessa is gone, Nathan. Disappeared completely. Cleared out her apartment, disconnected her phone. No, she wouldn't just... He stopped, the final piece clicking into place. She knew. She knew they would come after me when the deadline passed. That's why she left. I watched him struggle with this betrayal, seeing echoes of my own pain reflected in his expression. Despite everything, there was no satisfaction in witnessing his realization that he'd been used, manipulated. There's more, I said quietly. The $2 million you asked for? It's not enough to clear your debt. According to Harold's sources, you owe at least $5 million, possibly more. Nathan stared at me, stunned. That can't be right. The original loan was $2 million, with interest. With the terms they're actually enforcing, not the ones you thought you agreed to, it's more than doubled. The $2 million would just buy you time. He sank back onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I'm ruined, he whispered. Completely ruined. I stood by the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline as evening descended on the city. Lights twinkled in office buildings, ferries crossed the Sound. Life continued its normal rhythm while in this hotel room, a man's world collapsed. Entirely. Why did you do it, Nathan? I asked softly. Not just the affair or the business scheme, all of it. The lies, the other women Charles mentioned. We had a good life together. Was it really so unbearable? He looked up, his eyes hollow with defeat. It wasn't about you, Olivia. It was never about you. Then what was it about? Control. The word hung between us, simple yet loaded with meaning. My entire life has been predetermined. Where I would go to school, what career I would pursue, who I would. He stopped, catching himself. Who you would marry, I finished for him. Nathan sighed deeply. My father never explicitly told me to marry you. But he made it very clear that you were suitable, intelligent, cultured, the right background without being old money. The perfect addition to the Mitchell family. So our marriage was just another obligation? Another box checked on the Mitchell family agenda? At first, maybe. But Olivia, I did love you. In my way. Your way clearly included multiple affairs, and emptying our joint account. He flinched. The affairs were, I don't know how to explain them, moments of rebellion, Proof that I could make choices my father didn't approve of? They were never serious. Until Vanessa. Yes, until Vanessa. Nathan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. She was different, ambitious, calculating. She understood the pressure I was under, the frustration of always being someone's son rather than my own man. She recognized your vulnerabilities and exploited them perfectly, I observed. Yes. He laughed without humor. I thought I was finally taking control of my life, making my own decisions, charting my own course. Instead, I was being played like a puppet. By Vanessa, by the investors, maybe even by my father. Your father didn't know about any of this until recently. Maybe not the specifics, but he's always known I was restless, dissatisfied. Instead of addressing it, he just tightened his grip. Every time I suggested a new direction for the company, he shot it down. Every time I tried to step out of his shadow, he pulled me back in. I studied the broken man before me, neither the loving husband I had believed in, nor the calculating villain I had glimpsed yesterday. Just a deeply flawed human who had made catastrophic choices. What will you do now? I asked. Nathan shrugged, helplessly. What can I do? I have no money, no job, no home. The investors will come for me tomorrow night, and I have nothing to give them. You could go to the police. And tell them what? That I borrowed money from shady investors for an illegal corporate espionage scheme? I'd be trading a beating for a prison cell. He had a point. There was no clean way out of this mess, no solution that didn't involve significant pain and loss. I took a deep breath, the decision I'd been wrestling with finally crystallizing. I'll help you with the $2 million. Not because you deserve it, but because I don't want violence, regardless of who the victim is. Nathan stared at me, disbelief and hope warring in his expression. You'd do that? After everything? With conditions, I clarified. First, you will sign a formal agreement acknowledging that this is a one-time humanitarian distribution that does not affect my control of your trust. Second, you will cooperate fully with your father's legal team regarding the corporate espionage. And third, you will leave Seattle immediately after paying these investors. Leave? Where would I go? Anywhere that isn't here. You've burned too many bridges, Nathan. You need a fresh start, far away from the Mitchell name and all its entanglements. He considered my terms, desperation gradually giving way to resignation. And after I leave? What happens to the rest of what I owe? That's between you and these investors. I'm giving you a chance to walk away with your health intact. What you do with that chance is up to you. Nathan nodded slowly. I don't deserve your help. No, you don't, I agreed. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because it's the kind of person I want to be. Someone who doesn't use power to punish, even when punishment is deserved. A heavy silence fell between us, the weight of all that had happened, and all that was still to come, pressing down on both of us. I'll contact Harold tonight, I said, moving toward the door. He'll prepare the necessary paperwork. The funds should be available by tomorrow afternoon. Olivia, Nathan called as I reached for the handle. Thank you, and I'm sorry for everything. I paused, his apology washing over me like a wave that had lost its power to drown but could still leave me drenched. I know you are, Nathan, but sorry doesn't fix what's broken between us. It never could. The hallway outside his room felt cooler, cleaner somehow. I took a deep breath, the scent of high-end hotel soap and fresh linens replacing the stale air of Nathan's suite. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Heard you're at the Fairmont. Need to talk. Lobby bar? I found her at a quiet corner table, nursing a glass of red wine. Her expression brightened when she saw me, then dimmed as she registered my solemn mood. That bad? She asked as I slid into the seat across from her. Worse, I said, signaling the waiter for a drink of my own. Rebecca reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Dad told me about the trust fund, about you helping Nathan with the money. You don't approve? It doesn't matter what I think. It's your decision. She studied me carefully. But I am curious why you'd help him after everything he's done. I considered the question as the waiter placed a glass of Sauvignon Blanc before me. It's complicated. Part of me thinks he deserves whatever comes his way. But another part, the part that still remembers who I am beyond this marriage, doesn't want violence, regardless of who the victim might be. Rebecca nodded slowly. That's why I've always liked you, Olivia. Your moral compass stays true, even when the storms are raging. I smiled wryly. I'm not sure about that, but I am trying to make decisions I can live with afterward. So, what happens next? After you give Nathan the money, he leaves Seattle, starts over somewhere new. And I paused, the future stretching before me like an unmarked trail. I rebuild my life here. Including the development company? Dad mentioned you might be starting one. I sipped my wine, considering the question. Maybe. I have ideas, visions for projects that would be different from what Mitchell Development typically pursues. More community-focused, sustainable. Sounds perfect for Seattle. Rebecca's eyes lit up. Have you thought about environmentally innovative housing? Because I know some researchers at the university who are doing amazing work with new building materials, energy systems. For the next hour, we talked about possibilities, architectural concepts, innovative approaches to urban development, potential sites for pilot projects. For the first time in days, I felt genuine excitement, a spark of creativity untethered from the shadows of betrayal and deception. You know, Rebecca said as we finished our drinks, you're going to be incredible at this. You always had a vision that was wider, more inclusive than the traditional Mitchell approach. I'm not sure your father would agree. Actually, he does. Rebecca smiled at my surprise. He told me he's been watching you for years, how you interact with community leaders at events, how you research neighborhoods before the company invests, how you question the environmental impact of projects. He sees something in you that Nathan never had. What's that? A genuine connection to people beyond their net worth. Rebecca signaled for the check. That's why he wants to meet with you next week. Not just about the corporate espionage situation, but about a potential collaboration. Collaboration? Between Mitchell Development and whatever company I might start? Exactly. Dad's thinking long-term, about legacy. Nathan was supposed to be the future of Mitchell Development. But that's obviously not happening now, so he's exploring other options. The implications were startling. Charles Mitchell, legendary for his tight control of the family business, was considering bringing in an outsider, his disgraced son's soon-to-be ex-wife, no less. Why would he trust me after everything that's happened? I asked. Rebecca shrugged. Because unlike Nathan, you've demonstrated integrity even when it would have been easier not to. That matters to Dad more than blood. After Rebecca left, I remained at the table, turning her words over in my mind. A potential collaboration with Mitchell Development would change everything, providing instant legitimacy, access to resources, connections that would normally take years to build. But it would also mean remaining tied to the Mitchell family, to the legacy that had suffocated Nathan. Would it eventually do the same to me? My phone buzzed with a text from Harold. Papers ready for your signature. Meeting set with bank tomorrow at 11 a.m. The machinery was in motion. By this time tomorrow, Nathan would have the money he needed to buy his freedom, from the investors, if not from the consequences of his choices. And I would be moving forward into a future that looked nothing like the one I had imagined when I married him 8 years ago. I paid the bill and headed to my room, exhaustion finally catching up with me. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own decisions. But tonight, for the first time in what felt like forever, I would sleep knowing that I had acted according to my own values, not in reaction to someone else's betrayal. As I drifted off, I realized that in the midst of losing a husband, I had found something far more valuable, myself. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, a rarity in Seattle's typically overcast autumn. I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit and emerald blouse, armor for the day ahead. Harold met me in the hotel lobby at precisely 10:30, his briefcase containing all the necessary documentation. "Are you certain about this?" he asked as we walked to his car. "It's not too late to reconsider." "I'm certain," I said. "Not about whether Nathan deserves help. He doesn't. But about what kind of person I want to be." Harold nodded approvingly. Compassion when it's difficult is the true test of character. The meeting at Seattle Trust Bank was clinical and efficient. I signed where indicated, initialed amendments, and authorized the transfer. By 11:45, it was done. $2 million moved from Nathan's trust fund to an escrow account that would release the funds once certain conditions were met. "The money will be available to Nathan by 3 p.m., Harold confirmed as we left the bank. "I've arranged for a secure transfer protocol that will satisfy the investor's requirements while creating a paper trail for our purposes." "And the agreement about him leaving Seattle?" "Included in the documentation he signed yesterday. He has 48 hours after the payment to depart, or he'll be in breach of contract, which would trigger significant penalties." "Do you think he'll honor it?" Harold's expression was grim. "After what we've discovered about these investors, I don't think he has much choice. Staying in Seattle would be signing his own death warrant, regardless of the partial payment." We parted ways outside the bank, Harold heading to his meeting with Charles Mitchell, and I to the gallery. Maya had called during the bank meeting, something about a potential major collector interested in our newest installation. I was halfway to Pioneer Square when my phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello? Mrs. Mitchell?" The voice was male, unfamiliar, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "My name is Jonathan Mercer. I represent certain financial interests in the Seattle area." My blood ran cold. One of Nathan's investors calling me directly. "How did you get this number?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We have mutual connections." His tone was smooth, professional, not at all what I had expected from the kind of people Nathan had described. "I'm calling to express appreciation for your intervention in a delicate situation." "I don't know what you're talking about." He chuckled softly. "Of course. Let me speak plainly, Mrs. Mitchell. Your husband made some unfortunate choices. Those choices had consequences, financial and potentially physical. Your decision to facilitate payment has altered the trajectory of those consequences." I gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Are you threatening me?" "Quite the opposite. I'm assuring you that our business with Nathan is concluded, provided he honors our revised agreement. Your involvement is noted and appreciated." "I'm not involved in my husband's business dealings." "Perhaps not intentionally, but you've demonstrated both resources and judgment that our organization values. Should you ever require assistance with your own ventures, particularly in real estate development, we would be interested in discussing mutually beneficial arrangements." The implication was clear. They knew about my plans, about the trust fund, about everything. The surveillance hadn't just been on Nathan and Vanessa, it had extended to me as well. "I prefer to keep my business dealings transparent," I said, carefully. "As do we, Mrs. Mitchell. Despite what your husband may have told you, our organization operates within legal parameters. We simply move more efficiently than traditional financial institutions." There was a pause. "The offer stands. Should you reconsider? Good day." The line went dead, leaving me shaken. I pulled into a parking lot, needing a moment to collect myself. These people, whoever they were, had been watching all of us, playing a game with rules I didn't understand. As I sat there, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Money received. Thank you. Leaving tomorrow morning for Boston. Goodbye, Olivia. Boston. About as far from Seattle as he could get while remaining in the continental United States. A city where the Mitchell name might open some doors but wouldn't define him. Completely. A chance to start over. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say between us. Instead, I drove to the gallery, walking through the renovated warehouse space that had been my sanctuary for years. Maya greeted me with excitement, eager to introduce me to the collector who had expressed interest in acquiring several pieces from our new exhibition. He's specifically interested in your curation philosophy, she said as she led me to my office. Says he admires your eye for emerging talent and social commentary. The collector turned out to be a tech entrepreneur who had recently sold his company for 9 figures and was now investing in art as both passion and portfolio diversification. We spent 2 hours discussing specific pieces, artistic movements, and the gallery's future direction. As he was leaving, contracts signed for 3 major acquisitions, he paused at the door. I also hear you're moving into real estate development. Sustainable projects, community-focused. I stared at him, startled. Where did you hear that? He smiled enigmatically. Seattle's a small town in some ways, especially among certain circles. If you're looking for investors who share your vision, my fund might be interested. He handed me his card. Heavy stock, minimalist design, just a name and number. Another door opening, another potential path forward. By the time I left the gallery that evening, I had received 2 more similar overtures. One from an environmental, nonprofit director, another from a city council member known for progressive urban planning initiatives. Word was spreading about my potential new venture, creating momentum before I'd even formally begun. Standing on the sidewalk outside the gallery, I looked up at the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle illuminated against the darkening sky. This city had been my home for more than a decade, first as a hopeful art student, then as Nathan Mitchell's wife, and now as… What, exactly? The answer came to me with surprising clarity, whatever I chose to be. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, my identity wasn't defined by my relationship to someone else. I was simply Olivia, gallery owner, nascent developer, woman standing at the threshold of a future entirely of her own making. My phone buzzed with a text from Charles. Mitchell, dinner tomorrow? 7 p.m. at Canlis. Much to discuss. I smiled, typing my response. Looking forward to it. As I walked to my car, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. Nathan's collapse was complete. His marriage, career, reputation, all in ruins of his own making. But from those ruins, something new was emerging for me. Opportunity, independence, possibility. The game had changed, and somehow, against all odds, I had emerged the winner. 1 year later, I stood at the edge of a construction site in Fremont, watching as workers poured the foundation for what would become Emerald Heights, a mixed-use development combining affordable housing units, locally owned retail spaces, and a community art center. The morning sun glinted off the Space Needle in the distance, and the scent of fresh coffee drifted from the nearby cafes. This project, my first as CEO of Cornerstone Development, represented everything I had envisioned when I embarked on this unexpected journey. Ms. Mitchell! The site manager waved from across the lot, clipboard in hand. The structural engineers just arrived. They're waiting in the trailer. I smiled at the name he used. I'd kept Mitchell professionally, despite the divorce being finalized 6 months ago. In Seattle business circles, the name still opened doors, still commanded respect. It was an advantage I'd decided to leverage, rather than discard. I'll be right there, Tom, I called back, taking one more moment to absorb the scene before me. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here. A year ago, I was Olivia Mitchell, gallery owner and dutiful wife, whose husband had just emptied their savings account and whose world was collapsing in real time. Now I was Olivia Mitchell, developer and entrepreneur, whose vision for sustainable, urban renewal was taking physical form in steel and concrete. The transformation hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if I was in over my head. But with each challenge overcome, each milestone reached, my confidence had grown along with my company. The meeting with the structural engineers went smoothly. Minor adjustments to accommodate Seattle's seismic requirements, nothing that would significantly impact the timeline or budget. Afterward, I checked my watch and realized I needed to hurry if I was going to make my lunch appointment. Canlis Restaurant had become something of a tradition for these monthly meetings, neutral territory with excellent food and discreet service. Charles Mitchell was already at our usual table when I arrived, immaculately dressed as always, studying a portfolio of documents. "Olivia," he said, standing as I approached. "Right on time." Traffic was on my side today. I settled into my chair, accepting the glass of sparkling water the server immediately provided. "How's Martha?" "Thriving. She's in New York this week, visiting Rebecca." Charles closed his portfolio. "And how's Emerald Heights progressing?" "Foundation work started this morning. We're on schedule to complete the first phase by next spring." Charles nodded approvingly. "And the community response?" "Overwhelmingly positive. The neighborhood council voted unanimously to support the project last week. They particularly like the art center component." Our conversation continued easily as we ordered and ate, discussing developments in the Seattle real estate market, potential opportunities, challenges on the horizon. What had initially been awkward meetings between ex-father-in-law and former daughter-in-law had evolved into a comfortable business relationship. The arrangement we'd struck was unconventional but effective. Cornerstone Development remained independent, with me as majority owner and CEO, while Mitchell Development Group held a 20% stake as a silent partner. We shared resources, expertise, and market intelligence without competing directly. My focus on community-oriented sustainable projects complemented rather than challenged Mitchell's luxury commercial developments. "I've been reviewing the quarterly reports," Charles said as we finished our main course. "Cornerstone is outperforming. Projections by 17%. Impressive for a company in its first year." I accepted the compliment with a nod. "We've been fortunate with timing. The city's new affordable housing initiatives aligned perfectly with our first two projects." "Fortune favors the prepared," Charles replied. "You anticipated those initiatives months before they were announced." It was true. I'd spent weeks researching city council agendas, attending public forums, meeting with community advocates to understand which way the political winds were blowing. The result had been projects perfectly positioned to benefit from new zoning, incentives, and tax breaks. "I have something for you," Charles said, reaching into his portfolio. He withdrew a newspaper clipping and slid it across the table. The headline read, "Former Seattle executive launches tech startup in Boston." Below was a photo of Nathan, thinner than I remembered, standing beside a smiling woman I didn't recognize in front of a modest office building. "Thought you might be interested," Charles said, watching my reaction carefully. I scanned the article. Quickly. Nathan had founded a software company developing applications for the real estate industry. Initial funding had come from East Coast investors. The company employed 15 people and had just secured its first major client. "Good for him," I said, handing the clipping back. "Seems he's landed on his feet." "Apparently so." Charles tucked the article away. "I had our people check into it discreetly. The company is legitimate, small but growing. No signs of his former associations." The unspoken question hung between us. Did I regret helping Nathan escape the consequences of his actions? Did I wonder whether he deserved this second chance? "I'm glad," I said simply. Not for Nathan specifically, but because it suggests people can change, can rebuild after making terrible mistakes. Charles studied me, his expression softening slightly. You're an extraordinary woman, Olivia. My son never deserved you. Perhaps not, but I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't married him. I smiled wryly. Life takes unexpected turns. Our conversation shifted to safer topics, upcoming projects, market trends, Rebecca's new research grant. But as we parted ways outside the restaurant, Charles paused. You know, Martha asks about you constantly. Wants to know if you'd consider joining us for dinner sometime. No business, just family. The invitation caught me off guard. Family? Yes, Olivia. Despite everything, that's how she still thinks of you. How we both do. I felt a sudden, unexpected warmth spread through my chest. The Mitchells had been my family for 8 years, imperious, demanding, but also steadfast and loyal in their way. I had assumed the divorce would sever those ties completely. I'd like that, I said. Tell Martha to call me. We'll set something up. Charles nodded, the gesture somehow more personal than our usual formal handshake. I'll do that. As his driver pulled away, I checked my phone to find several messages from Maya, who now managed both the gallery and my personal schedule with terrifying efficiency. Reporter from Seattle Business Journal called again. Wants to feature you in their Women Changing Seattle issue. Yes, no? I typed a quick affirmative response, then scrolled to the next message. Rebecca called, says she has major news, and wants to meet for drinks tonight. Already added to your calendar for 7 p.m. at Cannon. I smiled, wondering what Rebecca's news might be. Since Nathan's departure, our friendship had deepened into something genuine and valued, untethered from my marriage to her brother. She had even invested personally in Cornerstone's second project, a renovation of a historic building in Columbia City. The final message gave me pause. Harold Winters called. Urgent, but not emergency. Please call him back when convenient. Harold rarely used the word urgent without good reason. I found a quiet corner of the sidewalk and dialed his number. Olivia, he answered immediately. Thank you for calling back so promptly. What's happened? Nothing alarming, I assure you. But I've received a rather interesting inquiry that I thought you should know about immediately. I'm listening. Vanessa Carter has resurfaced. The name sent an unexpected jolt through me. In the chaos of the past year, I had barely thought about the woman who had been the catalyst for my marriage's implosion. Where? I asked. Chicago, apparently. She's been working for a boutique development firm there for the past 10 months, using her maiden name. And the inquiry? Harold's voice took on the precise tone he used when navigating legal complexities. She's applied for a position with Westridge Properties' new Chicago office. They're conducting a background check, and contacted me as part of their due diligence given my connection to Mitchell Development. What did you tell them? Nothing yet. I wanted to consult with you first. I considered the implications. Vanessa had disappeared completely after abandoning Nathan to face his debt alone. Now she was attempting to rejoin the very company that had potentially placed her as a corporate spy in the first place. Either she was brazenly confident or remarkably naive. What would you advise? I asked. Professionally, disclosure of the facts without embellishment. Her involvement in the corporate espionage matter is documented, though never prosecuted. Westridge should have that information before making their hiring decision. And personally? Harold's voice softened slightly. That depends entirely on what outcome you wish to see, Olivia. Did I want revenge on Vanessa Carter? Did I want her to face consequences as Nathan had? Or had the past year granted me enough distance to view her as simply another flawed human, making her way through a complicated world? Tell them the truth, I decided. The documented facts, nothing more. What they do with that information is their business. Very well, I'll prepare a response immediately. After ending the call, I walked slowly back to my car, mulling over this unexpected ripple from the past. Vanessa re-entering the picture, even peripherally, was a reminder that the events of last year weren't fully resolved, might never be. They had changed the course of multiple lives, created new trajectories that continued to unfold in ways I couldn't predict or control. That evening, Cannon's dimly lit interior provided the perfect backdrop for Rebecca's news. She was practically glowing as she slid into the booth across from me, ordering a celebratory champagne cocktail before I could even ask what we were celebrating. "I've been offered the department chair position," she announced, unable to contain her excitement. "Youngest in the university's history. Rebecca, that's incredible." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "When do you start?" "Fall semester. There's so much to prepare. Curriculum reviews, research agenda, hiring, plans." She accepted her cocktail from the server with a grateful nod. "I never thought they'd choose me. The other candidates had decades more experience." "But none of your vision or energy," I pointed out. "The university made the right choice." We toasted her success, the conversation flowing easily between professional achievements and personal updates. As always, Rebecca's company was refreshing, direct, thoughtful, tinged with the sardonic humor that had helped her survive in the Mitchell family. "I heard you had lunch with Dad today," she said as we finished our second round. "Monthly strategy session?" "Among other things." I hesitated, then added, "He showed me an article about Nathan, his new company in Boston." Rebecca nodded, unsurprised. "Mom mentioned it last week. She keeps tabs on him through some Boston friends, though he rarely calls home himself." "How do you feel about his apparent success, after everything that happened?" She considered the question seriously, tracing the rim of her glass with one finger. "Conflicted. Part of me thinks he got off too easily. No criminal charges, no public disgrace, just a quiet exit and a fresh start 3,000 miles away. But another part," she sighed, "he's still my brother. I grew up idolizing him, you know, before he became Dad's corporate clone." "I didn't know that." "Oh, yes. When I was 8 and he was 16, Nathan was my hero. He taught me to sail, to rock climb, to stand up to bullies at school." A wistful smile crossed her face. "Sometimes I wonder if that person still exists somewhere inside the man who hurt you, who betrayed our family." Her vulnerability touched me. In focusing on my own pain, I had sometimes forgotten that others had lost Nathan too. The son, the brother, the person they had loved before ambition and resentment warped him. "I think people are more complex than simply good or bad," I said, carefully. "Nathan made terrible choices, hurt people who trusted him. But that doesn't erase the brother who taught you to sail, or the husband who held my hand through my father's funeral." Rebecca studied me with surprise. "You're remarkably compassionate toward someone who emptied your joint account and left you for another woman. Time and distance provide perspective, and building something new from the ashes of what was destroyed has been healing." "Speaking of building something new," Rebecca said, her expression brightening, "have you seen the brownfield site in Ballard? The one the city just rezoned?" The conversation shifted back to development opportunities, architectural innovations, the changing face of Seattle neighborhoods. By the time we parted ways, the unexpected glimpses into the past, Nathan's article, Vanessa's reappearance, had receded, replaced by plans and possibilities for the future. The next morning dawned, clear and warm, a perfect Seattle summer day. Instead of heading directly to the office, I drove to Discovery Park, following trails that wound through forest and meadow to the bluffs overlooking Puget Sound. It had become something of a ritual on the anniversary of that fateful bank notification, a quiet moment of reflection before diving back into the demands of my now busy life. Finding a secluded bench with a panoramic view, I sat and watched ferries crawl across the water, tiny against the vastness of the sound. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped even in July. The beauty of this place still took my breath away, even after years of calling it home. My phone vibrated with an email notification from Harold. The response to Westridge Properties regarding Vanessa had been sent, professional and factual. Another vibration brought a message from Maya about a potential investor wanting to tour the Emerald Heights site. A third alert was from Charles, confirming dinner with him and Martha next week. Each notification represented a strand in the new web of connections I had built since my marriage ended. Professional relationships, friendships, mentorships that formed the foundation of my reinvented life. None were perfect or without complexity, but together they created a network of support and purpose that was entirely my own. I thought about Nathan, starting over in Boston with his new company and apparently new relationship. I thought about Vanessa seeking to rebuild her career in Chicago. I even thought about those mysterious investors, whose threatening presence had faded after Nathan's departure, but whose offer of assistance still occasionally echoed in my memory during quiet moments. We were all moving forward, carrying the lessons and scars of what had happened, each finding our own path to whatever came next. There was a certain symmetry to it, a balance that felt, if not just, then at least complete. As I stood to leave, a young couple passed by on the trail, hands intertwined, laughing at some private joke. They reminded me of Nathan and me in the early days, hopeful, connected, unaware of the challenges ahead. For a moment, I felt a twinge of something like nostalgia, not for Nathan specifically, but for the simple certainty of that time, the unquestioning belief in shared futures and promises kept. But as I walked back to my car, I realized I wouldn't trade my current clarity, hard-won through pain and betrayal, for that naive certainty. The woman I had become in the aftermath of loss was stronger, wiser, more authentically herself than the woman who had once built her life around being Nathan Mitchell's wife. The gallery was busy when I arrived, a summer exhibition of emerging Pacific Northwest artists drawing crowds of tourists and locals alike. Maya intercepted me at the GI door, tablet in hand, already briefing me on the day's schedule. The investor can meet at the construction site at 2. The Seattle Times wants to interview you about the affordable housing component of Emerald Heights. I scheduled that for tomorrow morning. And Harold called again. Said it's not urgent this time, just a follow-up when you have a moment. I nodded, absorbing the information as we walked through the gallery. Any word from the city planning office about the permit for the Columbia City project? Nothing yet. I'll follow up this afternoon. As Maya continued her efficient rundown, I paused to observe a young woman studying one of our featured sculptures. A twisted metal form emerging from reclaimed wood that symbolized renewal and transformation. She seemed completely absorbed, circling the piece slowly, considering it, from different angles. It's about resilience, I said, moving to stand beside her. Finding new form after destruction. She glanced at me, surprised. That's exactly what I was thinking. The metal shouldn't work with the wood, but somehow it does, like they're stronger together because of what they've been through. I smiled, struck by her intuitive understanding. The artist lost her studio in a fire last year. This was her first piece after rebuilding. That explains the raw energy. The woman extended her hand. I'm Elena. I just moved to Seattle for graduate school in urban planning. Olivia Mitchell. This is my gallery. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Mitchell? Are you connected? To Cornerstone Development? I just read about your Emerald Heights project in my sustainable design seminar. I'm the founder and CEO, I confirmed, amused by her sudden excitement. That's amazing. Your integration of affordable housing with community spaces is exactly the kind of development model I want to study. As we continued talking, Maya hovered nearby, silently reminding me of my packed schedule. But something about Elena's enthusiasm, her genuine passion for the principles that drove my work, made me reluctant to end the conversation. "Would you be interested in seeing Emerald Heights in person?" I asked impulsively. "I'm heading to the site this afternoon for a meeting." "You'd be welcome to join." Her face lit up. "Seriously? That would be incredible." "Meet me back here at 1:30. I handed her my business card. "And bring questions. I love talking with people who share the vision." As Elena left, clutching my card like a precious artifact, Maya raised an eyebrow. "Adopting strays now?" I laughed. "Investing in the future. Students become professionals. Professionals become collaborators." Always thinking 3 steps ahead. Maya's tone was approving despite her teasing. That's why Cornerstone is thriving while the Nathans of the world scramble to rebuild. Her casual reference to my ex-husband caught me off guard, but I found it didn't sting the way it once might have. Nathan had become simply another character in the story of my life, significant but no longer central, a catalyst for change rather than the change itself. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of gallery business, calls with contractors, and preparations for the investor meeting. By the time Elena returned, her excitement barely contained as she brandished a notebook full of questions, I felt the familiar surge of energy that had carried me through the past year. The thrill of creating something meaningful, of shaping not just buildings but communities, opportunities, futures. As we drove to the construction site, Elena's thoughtful questions about urban sustainability gave way to more personal curiosity. "How did you move from running an art gallery to founding a development company? They seem so different." I considered how to answer, how much of my personal history to share with this earnest student. The full story, betrayal, revenge, unexpected power, was too complex for casual conversation. But the essence of it, the transformation at its heart, felt important to convey. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns," I said carefully. "A year ago, I thought I knew exactly what my future held. Then circumstances changed dramatically, and I found myself with resources and opportunities I hadn't anticipated." "So you just jumped into real estate development?" I smiled at the simplification. "Not exactly. I'd absorbed more than I realized during my marriage to a developer, and I discovered I had ideas about how development could better serve communities, be more sustainable and inclusive." "That's brave," Elena said, "using a difficult change as a launching pad for something new." Her comment stayed with me as we toured the site, as I introduced her to the team, as I watched her engage thoughtfully with the investor who seemed charmed by her enthusiasm. Brave. Was that what I had been? Or simply resilient, adaptive, determined, not to be defined by someone else's betrayal? Perhaps it was all of those things. The woman who had opened her door to find her husband's girlfriend standing there, smug and triumphant, could never have imagined becoming who I was now. That transformation, from betrayed wife to successful entrepreneur, from supporting character to protagonist in my own story, had required courage, yes, but also vision, perseverance, and the willingness to reimagine myself entirely. As the day drew to a close, I found myself on the rooftop of the partially constructed building that would become Emerald Heights, watching the sunset paint Seattle's skyline in hues of gold and rose. In the distance, ferries crossed the sound, mountains framed the horizon, and life continued its steady rhythm in the city I now shaped in small but significant ways. Nathan had taken our savings for his girlfriend, but he had forgotten I controlled his family's trust fund. That single fact had changed everything, set us both on new paths neither could have foreseen. His path had led to Boston, to starting over with depleted resources and damaged reputation. Mine had led here, to this rooftop, this moment, this sense of purpose and possibility. I didn't know what the future held, what new challenges or opportunities awaited. But standing there, surveying what I had built from the ruins of my former life, I knew with absolute certainty that I was ready for whatever came next. The betrayal that had once shattered my world had become instead the foundation for something stronger, more authentic, more truly mine. And for that unexpected gift, I was, despite everything, strangely grateful. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.